Don't worry, folks, it's a diet ginger ale. Huh, Doug?
She always drinks that after 3 beers.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Oh my gosh, isn't it a beautiful evening tonight?
Beautiful.
It is nice. We had a good week.
Busy week.
Yeah, a busy week. We had Jack with us all week. My gosh, he's a handful, isn't he?
We're going to bed early tonight.
Well, was that last night you went to bed at 7? Quarter after 7? Whew.
I wasn't tired. I just didn't want to babysit him.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you got to enjoy him the other evening too, so. Yeah.
No, he is a joy, but it's for young people.
Yeah. Yeah, after having him for the week, I just can't even imagine how we handled 4 kids at one time.
Me neither.
We had a lot more energy though back then. Do you hear the sirens in the back?
Yes, I do.
I don't know what that means, but we should probably lift those people up in prayer that everything is okay and that nobody's hurt and that all will be well for them.
That's true.
Yeah.
I'm going to pray for that.
I already did. I just said it.
Okay.
God already heard me. He doesn't need me to go like this, or he can hear me. So.
What's our topic tonight?
Well, our topic tonight is being a rebel. Okay, we're going to talk about how Jesus was a rebel, but what is it like for us to be rebels? And first, we should probably know what the definition of a rebel is. And there's kind of 2 different things that I saw. One is opposing or taking arms against a government or ruler. So you could just oppose them, or you could take up arms. But also it can be disobedience, or, you know, the rebellion. That kind of doesn't tell you much when they say the definition of a rebel is someone who rebels, you know.
Not a whole lot. Well, we'll go through this because my definition of rebellion is one of those.
Okay. So, before we get on to how Jesus was a rebel, Doug, have there been any times in your life where you have been a rebel? I would say more so along the lines of rebellious or disobedient.
Yeah, I don't see being rebellious. I can't say I was rebellious. I wasn't rebelling against any type of authority or opposing any authority, but I was definitely disobedient
As a what? As a toddler?
well, probably all my life to a certain extent, but you know, through your teenage years, you tend to be disobedient quite a bit, do things that you might not do now, or you learn from those mistakes. But yeah, I was disobedient, but thinking about this, I don't know if I could really classify that as being rebellious.
Well, it says here, opposing or taking arms against a government or ruler. And in my household, my father was the ruler. So you could say whenever I was disobedient and didn't listen to what he told me to do, that I was being rebellious, that I was being a rebel. And I gave him plenty of opportunity to call me a rebel because I was in many ways. I could tell you hundreds of stories, but tonight I'll just tell you one that stands out. It's when I was about 16 years old. My girlfriend and I decided to have a party at our house while Mom and Dad and my other siblings, my sister Jody was already out of the house and in college, and the other 2 younger siblings still lived at the house with me. But for whatever reason, I think it was because I had a job, I decided not to go on the family vacation. And so I stayed at home, and my girlfriend and I got that brilliant idea to throw a party. Well, we figured we'd throw it for just a few kids. And then a few more kids heard about it, and it ended up being like a nightmare. There was a lot of kids ended up coming and destroyed some of the family stuff, like my brother's basketball net was ripped down. There was damage to the one sink. There was a hole in the wall. I forget what all else occurred, but it wasn't good. And then my parents came home. My girlfriend and I, we just decided we would get this house cleaned up, show no signs, no evidence that anything had happened. And sure enough,
How'd that go for you?
yeah, that went really well. We really did a great job, or we thought we did. But the thing was, we actually did do a pretty good job. But out in a little sitting room we had where we used to watch TV, there was a little TV stand. And my father was sitting in there one evening and happened to notice one beer cap that we did not dispose of. And back in those days, there was really no alcohol in our house on a regular basis. So there would have been no reason for that beer cap to be there because my parents weren't drinkers. You know, they might be an occasional for a holiday party or something, but there was never any just beer sitting around. There wasn't like there was always a six-pack of beer in the fridge or anything. So they knew that had to happen from when I was there. And then then after a while they noticed some of the other damages, but it all came down to that I was in trouble. I can't remember what my punishment was, but the worst thing I remember is my father telling me how disappointed and hurt he was by my behavior. So it wasn't that the punishment that was, you know, I think he grounded me for a while, but that did not bother me. But to know that I hurt him
that was the worst part.
that was it. And but of course I rebelled after that again, you know. I think that affected me for a short period of time, but you know, so.
Well, like most of us at that age, we didn't learn our lessons very quickly.
No, it took some time.
Yes.
But so you didn't have any specific things you can remember because you were what, like not as bad as me?
I can remember specifics. I just don't want to air them.
Oh, okay.
Everybody knows me as perfect.
Oh, that's right. You don't want to know what Doug used to do. Well, do we think of Jesus as a rebel? Do we think of him as either opposing or taking up arms against a government or ruler, or disobedient or rebellious?
Well, he was definitely teaching against what the Pharisees were teaching something totally different and new, and that definitely does not set well with the authorities. So I would say you could classify Jesus as a rebel in that sense.
In
yes.
that sense.
In that sense.
He wasn't a rebel in where he was disobedient to his Father.
Definitely not.
And I'm talking to God, the Heavenly Father. He was never disobedient to God. But he was disobedient to all the ways of the laws that had nothing to do with what God had set forth.
Right.
So there's a story in Luke. It's chapter 7, 11 through 17. It says, Jesus, who stumbled into a funeral procession, he saw a mother crying because of her dead son, her one and only son. She was also a widow, which meant two things. She was now all alone, and widows are part of the Anawim. In Scripture, the Anawim were those who were in the margins of society, the poor, the oppressed, orphans, and widows. Widows were especially vulnerable because women are often financially supported by their husband and male children. So a childless widow, like this one in the story, was at a very pitiable, precarious position. Who will support her now? The Gospel says that Jesus was moved by this sight. Some Bible translations say that Jesus felt pity for the mother. Some say Jesus felt sorry for the mother. Other translations say that Jesus felt compassion, but none of these words, felt sorry, pity, or compassion, captured the Greek word, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly, splachna. Splachna usually refers to the organs of the heart, lungs, intestines, liver, and spleen. In the New Testament, splachna meant an emotion emanating from a person's very insides, a violent, painful, visceral gut emotion that almost tore a person's insides. So my translation, this is the gentleman who's writing this. My translation would be, when Jesus saw the mother mourning for her dead son, her one and only son, Jesus felt her pain that it almost tore him inside out. His deeply felt suffering for the poor woman welled up from the bowels of his emotion, and it was this deep sharing of the mother's pain that propelled Jesus to alleviate her suffering. This is so far so good, the man says. That is what we would expect of Jesus. However, there is a spiritual conundrum presented by this story, a conundrum that is not so obvious to us. In Jesus' religious tradition, a religious observant person would not dare near a corpse. So here Jesus is nearing this corpse, which was against their tradition. To come into contact with a dead person would render one unclean and impure before God. Remember all those things that they had to, even a woman who had her menstrual cycle, I think could not come for, I don't know how long after it was, but she was classified as unclean at that time. Anyone who had come into contact with a dead person would not be permitted in the inner chambers of the Jewish temple unless he had performed a ritual of purification lasting no less than 7 days. So, what is Jesus doing near the corpse? He should have been running away to avoid religious impurity and defilement. Instead, he seemed to have gone to great lengths to break religious tradition. Why? The gospel explains it. Jesus' insides were being torn by the suffering of the mother. Jesus' heart was breaking as he felt sorrow, pain, suffering, and the anguish of this woman. Compassion, mercy, and love led him to break the religious tradition. So what is our understanding of God? Is God primarily one who makes demands when you think of all the laws, the rules that he gives us to live by? Did he give us a set of rules to follow that must be kept at all cost? For Jesus, as well as the Old Testament believers, God is primarily gracious and merciful and slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. Do we think that God looks only at our external compliance with the law? For Jesus, God looks at the heart. That is why, for example, Jesus would equate the lustful look, which actually expresses the desire of the heart, with the actual committing of adultery. There is an implicit warning for us in the gospel today. All religious laws, rules, and traditions must serve the cause of love and charity. If they don't serve for love and charity, they're really not
worth anything.
No, That is, all religious rules, laws, and traditions must lead us to be more humane, more compassionate, and deeply merciful. So, when he saw that woman in pain, that sorrow that she has, he chose to not go by what the law said and stay away from a dead corpse. He went above that because he was showing compassion, mercy. He felt her pain. The difficulty is that we often make many religious laws and traditions that prevent us from fully loving God and one another.
Amen.
Yep. In Romans 13, 8 through 10, it says, love fulfills the law. Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. For whoever loves others has fulfilled the law, the commandments. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not murder. You shall not steal. You shall not covet. And whatever other command there may be are summed up in this one command. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. So who is our neighbor, Doug?
Everybody.
Everybody. Even those people we think are beneath us are our neighbors. And they deserve God's love. They don't need us putting barriers up so that they can't receive that love. They don't need us telling them our viewpoints on what they should be doing. Let us bring them to God. Let them feel God's love then we can teach and they can learn in a loving environment.
It's hard to do that.
Yeah, it is.
It's very hard to do. To love somebody without judgment, to love somebody without condemning them, to be able to look beyond all the external things about that person and just look at the inside and give yourself completely to that person is something that is not easy to do. And I think we can only truly do that if we do count on God giving us that grace to do that. As human beings, we have a hard time with that.
Oh yeah, this I was reading an article, and here this guy, I think he was a preacher, said there was an article he wrote. Oh, where was it? Why people are really leaving the church, and this is just a snippet of that. But he had a ton of reasons. But here's one reason: your love doesn't look like love. He said, love seems to be a pretty big deal to you, but we're not getting that when the rubber meets the road. In fact, more and more, your brand of love seems incredibly selective and decidedly narrow. Filtered out all the spiritual riffraff, which sadly includes far too many of us. It feels like a big bait and switch sucker deal, advertising a come-as-you-are party, but letting us know once we're in the door that we really can't come as we are. We see a Jesus in the Bible who hung out with lowlives and prostitutes and outcasts and loved them right there. But that doesn't seem to be your cup of tea. Church, can you love us if we don't check all the doctrinal boxes and don't have all of our theology figured out? It doesn't seem so. Can you love us if we cuss and drink and get tattoos and, God forbid, vote Democrat? We're doubtful. Can you love us if we're not sure how we define love and marriage and heaven and hell? It sure doesn't feel that way. From what we know about Jesus, we think he looks like love. The unfortunate thing is, you don't look much like him. That hurts.
That hurts.
That hurts. Woo! He was letting Christians in all have it. And he had a whole different series of things. He went on to say about how the fancy bands and the big screens on the TV and all that, you know, you might get them in there on a Sunday morning and make them feel good, but that doesn't help them in the week when they're dealing with life and problems and everything else. We're just not showing love. Love is what everybody needs.
I agree, 100%.
Go ahead.
Well, that might take us into a topic next week. 'Cause, I had the opportunity to minister last week, and I talked a little bit about religion, and while we're sitting in church, what takes our focus off of God? It's not directly related to this, but in a lot of ways it is. A lot of times we're interested in religion, or rituals, or ceremonies, the order of how we do things, instead of truly worship or truly loving others or inviting others in.
That's true. This person here says, God's love is merciful, compassionate, just, and inclusive. God's love is the law, the highest law that is the basis of all human laws and rules, including church laws. Our job is not to make religious rules that would make it hard for people to feel and access the love and mercy of God. Religious and spiritual people are in dangerous position to be seduced by the evil one, or you could refer to him as Satan or the devil, to make rules and laws that would make us less tolerant of others, less compassionate, less merciful, and less just. The religious elite of the day considered Jesus a rebel. He was not obedient to man-made, performance-driven religion. Religious leaders could not control him, so they killed him. And that's kind of like what we do to people today who we feel we can't control. We don't necessarily kill them, but we want them to go away. We want them to keep their mouths shut.
Well, if they won't change to our ways, we may invite them in, but they better change to our ways, or else we tend to chastise them.
Yeah.
We tend to push them out.
Don't make them feel welcome. Jesus was never disobedient to God, but he was to the religious traditions of the day. Funny thing is, Jesus, a rebel of the religious leaders, accomplished salvation for all the rebels of the world. He accomplished salvation for a rebellious person, such as myself, or you, or all of you watching today. And that makes Jesus pretty darn cool, doesn't it?
Yes, he does. He's a rebel with a cause.
He's a rebel with a cause, a good cause, a good cause. And we'd be more, with the world would be a better place if we all would make our lives shine that light of Jesus, shine that love of Jesus. And you're dusting on the motorcycle. See how easy I get distracted?
Take two.
Take two. Oh, goodness. But
Well,
anyway.
I think if we would just think about that word love and what all it means, it's a simple thing, but a difficult thing.
It's easier to dislike somebody than it is to like them.
It's easier to condemn than to approve.
It's hard living. It's hard being around people. I mean, people don't want to be lonely, but it's hard being around people on a daily basis, you know. We can love all we want from out here, like you and I could be sitting here talking about how, oh my, we love people, and you know, we want to be like Jesus.
Did I love everybody today? Did I show
gosh.
compassion today?
But then when I walk out the door and have to go deal with somebody at work, and I start thinking to myself, boy, Jesus, help me. Because it's not that easy. So, well, Doug, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Nope, I think you pretty well covered it.
Oh, okay.
Now, who can we talk about?
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me, not that about who can you talk about, but that we're going to have some guests occasionally. We're going to have somebody in the month of August come, and that would be our Pastor Brady and our daughter, who just happens to be dating him. They're going to be coming to sit with us and discuss, and we're going to let them pick out the topic that they want to talk about, and we'll just kind of fill in. And then we'll see about getting someone here for the month of September, too, so to come to one of our talk times.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and advertise Church Miller Style?
Oh, I already did. Church Miller Style is August 26th at 4 p.m. right here in our pavilion in our backyard. So it'll be a great time. You have a short message, short, not a long message, and we'll have some maybe some cornhole, sing some songs. Hopefully it's a nice day. We can build a fire. Just enjoy a nice time together. So, yeah, I already put it on Facebook. It's going to be in the church bulletin. So,
Just a time of fellowship, some worship, and just enjoying the day with people.
yeah.
Hopefully we can love them all.
Yeah. Well, we might as well pray, Doug.
Why don't you pray tonight?
Look what I did, Doug. See, I'm not good at...
Yes, you wrote one out.
I wrote one out. I'm so sorry. I'm just not good like that. Thank you, Jesus, for rebelling. Thank you for your healing, your love, your grace, and your mercy. Thank you for always being our friend, for carrying us through the hard times and celebrating with us in the good. Help us to always keep our eyes focused on you and not on religion. We love you, Lord, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.